You might think Santorini's story of destruction ended in the Bronze Age. It didn't. On July 9th, 1956, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake leveled the island. Fira and Ia were shattered. Houses collapsed. Infrastructure gone. This was post-war Greece. There was no money to rebuild. So once more, people left. Entire villages became ghost towns. Ia, the most photographed village in the world today, with just a few more thousand residents, was nearly abandoned for 2 decades. It wasn't until the 1970s and the beginning of the tourism boom that people returned in any meaningful numbers and began to rebuild out of the ruins and reclaim the caldera's edge, giving us the whitewashed and pastel cliffside homes we now associate with Santorini. And while Santorini is geologically some 500,000 years old and was first settled at least as far back as 4,000, even 5,000 BCE, in many ways the Greek idyll we know is only about 50 years old, which makes the illusion of its timelessness even more remarkable. Severe earthquakes in 2025 are the latest proof positive that Santorini's days as we know it are still numbered. The roiling magna beneath our feet, no matter where we travel, guarantee that the maps we know are only temporary. Take the big island of Hawaii. In 50,000 years or so, a new island, Loihi, will join the island chain, or it will merge with the big island, becoming its 6th great peak. And 80 million years after that, the entire Hawaiian chain, the tropical paradise, the destinations we all know and love, will sink to the bottom of the Pacific. The time scale of all this change is vast, but the fault line along which Greece is formed is among the most active in the world. So while Santorini has 300 days of sunshine every year, its beauty shouldn't be confused with paradise. Last year, the region endured some 25,000 earthquakes over an 8-week period, often as frequently as every couple of minutes. That brought tourism to a halt and caused about 90% of permanent residents to evacuate. But in time, the temblors tamed, and of course news cycles come at us with great velocity, and within a few months, the locals were back, and queues at the funicular to reach Fira were once again hours long. The round island was born of primal forces, and what remains of the active stratovolcano one day will most assuredly be dramatically reshaped again, if not destroyed altogether. It will join ancient Greek cities lost to earthquakes, subsidence, tsunamis, and abandonment over millennia, including the list shown on screen. Helike, for instance, simply slipped downslope overnight, disappearing beneath the waters, and in the following centuries became a disaster tourist destination as people sailing overhead would peer to its standing columns, its remaining neighborhood streets, organized civilization made aqueous. Technically, these cities are gone because they were built in the Hellenic Arc subduction zone, where the African plate dives under the Aegean Sea plate. The fault affects the entire eastern Med, Crete, mainland Greece, and gives rise to eons of underwater volcanic activity and coastal uplift, and so many stories. More stories are most certainly waiting to be written. Santorini has almost no rain, ferocious winds, blazing sun, and no topsoil. And yet it produces some of the most celebrated white wine in the world. Because the vines here do something you will not see anywhere else. They grow in couloura, basket shapes, woven into low circles hugging the ground. I was confused when we were initially driving Santorini's landscape during our first trip in 2001. The occasional field of black volcanic scree strewn with woven baskets were a mystery. But mystery was replaced by disbelief when we learned that the rough and tumble arrangements were vineyards. Now, given the baskets appeared to be woven of grapevine, should have been a tip-off, right? Instead of being trained on low arbors, the grapevines are coiled into living vessels with sides about 18 inches tall. Clusters of grape grow inside the basket, protected from the sandblasting wind. The vines trap morning dew for moisture, and the soil, it's called aspa, volcanic ash, pumice, and lava rock. No clay, which means the phylloxera louse that destroyed Europeans' earthen-based vineyards in the 1800s can't survive here. Some of these root systems are 200, even 400 years old. Old vine wines, indeed. Now, some travelers love to hate on Paris. How original. And some wine lovers who whisper in hallowed tones about bouquet and terroir love to hate on Greek wine, which only proves their actual comprehension of what the word terroir means. Its definition: taste and flavor imparted to a wine by the environment in which it's produced. I remember learning in 2010 that dishes made from the meat of sheep raised in the fields near Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, France, taste of the briny grass they graze on. It's lamb that tastes of the English Channel. It's the same thing here. Wine produced on the remnants of a volcano in the middle of the Aegean Sea tastes like, well, surf-kissed tuff eroded by Aeolian gods. Santorini's signature grape is a Sirtico. Its wines are bone dry, high acid, with a salty mineral finish that literally tastes like sea air with hints of ash. It's terroir on steroids. Historically, Santorini had a saying: there is more wine than water on this island. That's because the rainwater had to be carefully collected in cisterns, while wine was readily available. Opa, fellow travelers. Santorini's unique cuisine, it shouldn't be surprising to learn, is shaped by stress. Vegetables here grow under brutal conditions, which concentrates flavor. Think cherry tomatoes packing a sweet intensity and having a protected designation of origin, meaning they're certified to grow only on the slopes of Santorini. These are different than sun-blushed tomatoes, which are usually commercially processed in massive convection ovens. Or occasionally at a small farmer's market, you can find small quantities still semi-dried on the vine. But Santorini's tomatoes stand apart. Think white eggplant that's almost seedless, has almost no bitterness, and doesn't absorb oil when it's fried. Think capers from low, scrappy bushes that thrive in the volcanic rock. Prized, plump, they're perfect in salads, sauces, and fish dishes. And finally, think of a yellow split pea grown only here for 3,500 years, called Lateris climenum. This makes fava Santorini the island's most iconic dish. A creamy puree topped with olive oil, onions, and those capers. This is uniquely Santorini-style hummus. With a sirtiko, it's perfect. The wine cuts the richness and mirrors the dip's earthiness. Now, add in tomato keftedes, which are smashed tomato fritters, sanyaki, pan-seared cheese, which literally is the best thing about Greek cuisine, in my opinion, grilled seafood like shrimp and octopus, a uniquely island garlic pasta, and finish it all later with an amber vinsanto with maybe honeyed almonds called cruffetto, or dried fruit and nut truffles called copagna. In the Travel Insider, I call these foodie musts because in each of these you are tasting volcanic agriculture and tastes unique to Santorini. It's terroir for food. Near the village of Messagonia sits Panagia Episcopi, the most important Byzantine church on the island, built in the 11th century. For generations, this church wasn't simply open, waiting for tourists to appear with cameras in hand. A priest, of course, was in charge, but if you wanted to visit the church when the priest wasn't around, you had to find the old woman in the village who kept the keys. Turns out that 25 years ago, the old woman found me. It was a hot day in early June. The rest of my party stayed in our air-conditioned rental car as I approached the fortress-like building, aiming to capture a quick shot. Even as I focused and drew a breath to be steady, I felt a bony hand grip my arm like what I assume is the equivalent of a handcuff. I turned and met my host. She was dressed in a heavy black cloak with a wide drooping hood, all but obscuring her face. I was convinced she had to have been sent by central casting. She then reached into the impossible folds of that black fabric and drew out a massive, ancient ring of keys. And these weren't keys that unlock things we come across in our everyday. These keys were time travel in iron and bronze, each 10 to 12 inches long, and each seeming to be musically tuned to clang in different keys. We crossed the remainder of the stone plaza, and the woman unerringly guided one of the keys into forged darkness. With a deep, grating, mechanical clack, hidden magic released its hold, and the ornately carved door swung free. What followed for the next 20 minutes was unlike anything in my life before or since. It was a well-trod route we traced, one that many yayas before mine had taken across centuries as each in turn grasped the arms of stunned visitors like me. These keepers of the keys are central to tales told by visitors to Greece across time. But it seems to be a genre of anecdote destined only for annals of nostalgia not long from now. With the welcome of creaking hinges, we crossed the tired threshold into the church's narthex. Then in just a short distance more to the gilt altar beneath a small pink dome glowing overhead. On each side, dark columns, and with pride of place, mosaics, frescoes, a marble iconostas, and here and there time-worn stones, so-called spolia. Much of it probably reused from the upper reaches of ancient Thera. And one of the most precious Byzantine icons in Greece and the world, the Panagia Glycophilousa. And all the while, impassioned chatter through toothless gums. Oh, fellow travelers, it was the best. So, even as my docent worked her script, her rheumy eyes tracked the direction of my own gaze, and her careful narration pivoted on a dime with eager pointing and nodding, and every bit of the story in rasping Greek, tinged with urgency and deep, deep pride. Some of the most curious moments of our time together were as my guide gestured toward stretches of empty wall. Well, turns out in 1982, with the chaos and distraction of repair work underway, 3 framed frescoes and 26 movable icons were stolen. I had no idea of this 25 years ago, of course, but I could tell the stories of these blank walls were essential to her, and by extension to me. Because even without knowing another's language, one can tell when attention must be paid. Just 4 years later, an airport taxi driver would have a similar urgency in his voice as he drove us to our Bangkok hotel at 1 a.m. This was just a couple of months after the devastation of 2004's Boxing Day tsunami. I now understand my Greek yaya, or grandmother, was rounding out the headlines of that sad story from 1982, trying to heal a wound, to make something visible where there is now only blank stucco and hurt. Finally, I was escorted to a donation box. Greece had entered the EU a bit more than 5 months earlier, but the euro wouldn't replace the drachma for another 6 months, so my old coins clanked into the wooden box, and then with that firm hand still holding my arm, we retraced our steps, reversing the transit of the apse, the narthex, the threshold, and then the swinging of heavy wood and methodical re-engaging of timeless scraping gears of iron and bronze. It's a ritual unchanged for centuries, and one that changed me. I returned to the car and met with plenty of ribbing and welcome, cooling AC, but I also returned with new eyes, and I know now a new corner in my heart. That's the power of travel, of open moments, when time stands still and we're engaged in building a new capacity for understanding, for connection, in ways mysterious and profound. And yes, time that turns out to be both sacred even as it's a little bit funny, so totally and ridiculously akimbo from our everyday. Santorini's oldest standing church has endured fires, the 1956 earthquake, but its looted artifacts have never been recovered. I like to imagine there is a different Yaya now surprising visitors with an iron grip and iron ring of keys, giving tours through time in a language few audiences on vacay are prepared to comprehend, but which, if those visitors truly listen, will understand deeply. Logically, I know those symbolic keys from a quarter century ago, forged metal representing continuity and an inviolable link with the past, are now replaced with modern security and 24/7 oversight by a priest and team of caretakers, all with apps to monitor digital locks, protecting those precious relics, and all from a distance on their mobile screens. And yet, an illogical part of me hopes that beneath the patina of new technologies, old ways, like great bronze keys kept by a village widow, still survive, like Santorini itself. You'll hear people say Santorini had 600, 800, even more than 1,200 churches. Well, some are only yards apart, like the churches of Santa Anastasia and Saint Spiridon, separated by only 30 feet. Some are ubiquitous on postcards. Others are famous for a particular icon or fresco, or bells, like the four atop the church of Santa Caterini, which for more than 400 years has been in the constant habit of surviving a string of earthquakes, 9 of them 6.0 or greater on the Richter scale. Incidentally, St. Catherine's endures, even as most of the windmills in the same neighborhood were brought down by the earthquake in 1956. But most churches on the island are tiny family chapels, which explains why making a true inventory is impossible. They're private chapels, built for a patron saint, used for weddings, baptisms, or only for feast days, which means the doors sometimes open just a handful of times in any year. As in much of the Western world, religion in Greece is increasingly a cultural rather than weekly practice. Less than 20% of Greek people attend a weekly service, but nearly everyone attends services on Christmas, Easter, August 15th. The Dormition of Mary, the falling asleep or death of Mary, Mother of God, is an entirely sacred affair 430 miles north of Santorini. On Mount Athos, where Mary spent her final years, her death is marked as a multi-day series of events, centered on intensely spiritual commemoration. And August 15th has strong religious tradition components across all of Greece, but on the mainland, as in Santorini, there is an equally important social and festival vibe to many of the proceedings, including the preparation of particular foods and villages coming together as a community. Fira is the bus hub. Every route goes through it. The Fira to Ia bus costs about €2 or $5 round trip. Taxis are scarce. Parking is worse. Uber exists, but it's really just licensed taxis with a €30 base fare, likely even more. Instagram Island is tiny, less than 30 square miles, and until recently has been hosting up to 17,000 cruise passengers in a single day. Over-tourism, being loved to death, is now a political battle on Santorini, which is why there's proposed limits on beds in existing hotels and a proposed halt to construction of new properties. Cruise caps have been put in place at about half of what they've been in the past few years. Infrastructure strain is also actively being addressed, with one example being new limits of 500 in queue to ride the funicular from the port to Fira. All of which is why the smartest travelers plan to move slowly and use one of the island's 23 KTEL buses if possible, and also to spend their time and dollars exploring villages and views inland, not just on the Caldera's rim.